Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the collective. I was hoping I could get that in there right at the right
You
before I
still
was saying.
can. You could do a special
There you
request.
go. Could you do that again, Seb, for us?
I don't even remember what I said. This is how bad I am, dude.
It just,
Well, it was
just,
fantastic.
it
Let me
really was.
say, whatever it was that you did, because I don't remember either, it was amazing.
It was like the Skeletor voice, the let's get into it or something. Anyway.
Oh, was it?
doesn't
I thought it was
matter.
more like a little bit more Batman-ish, no?
Yeah, I guess maybe about more. Yeah, Skeletor was a bit higher.
What do I know? I
know
don't
if
even
Seb could
remember.
get to that. Do you have that kind of range, Seb? Or can you do the
That's
Skeletor
this.
voice?
Everybody's asking, like, well, what is you guys experience anything, as a result of your service? No, we don't. Like, literally every 2 seconds, I can't remember where I stand. Everything's fine here.
Yeah,
I
we're all
totally
good.
did. I totally agree. And since I've met you, Bill, you're a great dude.
Bill? I thought your name was Dave. Dang.
What are you talking about, Fred?
Hey, what are we doing here?
Right?
I don't know, but I think my
When we
name is
started-
Shaun. I see it on the screen.
It is just say Shaun. But yeah, so Salty,
Oh.
good to see you. This is welcome to the first 5 minutes of the collective, where we forget each other's names. And I don't know about you guys. There are lots of times where I will walk into a room and I will go,
What was I here for? Or whose room is this?
You know what's kind of interesting though. I was just talking with my son about this. Both sons actually. Yesterday, we were coming back off the BJJ mats, and as we were walking into the local grocery store, guy walks through and he gives me the nod, and so I give him a nod back. And one of the boys says, "Who's that?" And I said, "I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Somehow they know me, but I don't know them. I recognize them. I just don't know their name. I don't know what they do, but they always give me a nod. So I give a nod back. But that's small
100%.
towns, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And so one of the tricky things about small towns is you kind of have to remember people. In
Mhm.
big cities, you don't so much. But out here, like if you're given a nod, you should know a dude's name. But I don't.
I have all kinds of techniques for this. Like I will go and say something in the conversation, like, what were you doing the last time we spoke? Just in case there has been a change or whatever. So then they're like, oh, I was at X, Y, and Z, and now it makes sense. Or, like anything that kind of flanks them into telling me who they are and where I know them from. Basically. And it's really interesting because I don't forget a face ever. I'll pick up a face in a crowd of somebody I've met, years ago, but names like literally will forget mine. I'm not exaggerating. It's not for a lack of caring or anything like that. It's literally they come in and they go out. So what I have to do when I get formally introduced to somebody is to repeat their name several times over the course of that conversation, in my head. And I'll repeat it in my head so that I remember, because otherwise it's gone immediately.
Yeah, you know what my trick is? I take my wife with me.
Yeah,
and then and
I have the same trick.
and then after a while, she got tired of saying, "How come you didn't introduce me to that person?"
Mm-hmm.
I don't know their name.
You introduce yourself, and I find out what their name is.
That's what we do now.
Yeah, I totally like it.
There's a really good trick for that. Is if you have your wife with you and you go, "Hey, so this is my wife, Amber,"
all the time.
Yep.
And then as soon as they go to like shake hands or something, that person will introduce themselves to her, and then you're like, yeah. But
well, actually, there's a second step after that. When they're shaking hands or whatever, they're doing swapping business cards or whatever. I just do one of these ninja smoke bomb. You disappear.
And actually, speaking of the nod, and I'm going to get into this in a second. First off, Winterstorm, good morning. Good to see you. Says, just call everybody buddy and pal. Problem solved.
That is my MO. I mean, even on the socials.
Yeah, I've seen that.
I'm all about it.
Yeah, the buddies and the pals. And the one of the nice things was, back in the service at least, somebody was asking me at one point was, how do you tell the difference between all the ranks? And I was just like, if they got bars, it's sir, ma'am, whatever, right? It's that simple. But otherwise, you just kind of say, roger that, and you do whatever they ask you to. But as per the nod, this is something interesting I heard the other day, was that there's some people were talking about it, in that when you nod to somebody that you don't know, you'll instinctually nod downwards, right? Mm-hmm. And if you do know the person, you'll instinctively nod upwards. Hey man, how's it going?
I do both, but I mix it up. I know that is a pattern. I recognized it in myself quite a long time ago. So I flippity flop it from time to time.
Clever. I like it.
Well, not that clever. I just figured I'd just randomize it. You know what I mean?
No, it's a good way to do it.
Yeah. Shaun Taylor keeping forensic biology in check.
Screw the rest of your theories.
The person was theorizing in that if you instinctually nod down, you're actually covering your vitals.
Oh, that's cool.
Versus up, you're exposing your vitals
as a survival mechanism.
Yeah, but the thing is that I think the nods have only developed over like the last couple, maybe 100, 200 years. So
how do you know?
Because if you look back at the etiquettes of the day, of the time periods, the nod only came into play.
Okay, so let me get this straight. So in 1600s, when Mongolians were meeting,
1609, I think it was.
They didn't nod. They didn't nod. We don't know.
No one nodded.
Right now.
No one nodded. People.
In fact, you had to ride your horse like this.
I don't know. Walked right past.
You couldn't nod down. You had to lean it. You had to lean at the waist.
It was a horse bow, is what it was.
I mean, that is a skill in of itself. You can get a horse to bow.
That's how circuses started.
That's exactly it, right?
Chance with the science.
Science. That's what it is. This is me.
Let me throw another theory at you. Okay. And this is going to skew the studies to some degree. So, some people will nod down to protect their throat, for example, while they're riding through the village, whereas I nod down to look at them down my nose with disdain,
with sneer,
straight down my nose.
For a second there, I thought you were going to say something serious.
Yeah, right.
No, I wasn't. Not at all.
Winter storm kicks back. Upwards exposes your neck, showing vulnerability, openness to them. Absolutely. And then Doc C says, "Why do I feel history is being rewritten?"
Well, that's funny because I almost mentioned Doc C in my sentence, to be honest. Because yesterday in the podcast, he was talking about how some people will they'll ignore 30 studies, but selectively choose one study because it agrees with their opinion, as it were. And so I was about to twist that whole thing up and reference Doc C in his studies, but he's already psychoanalyzing us.
Yeah, he's already in there. And then Winter Storm kicks in with the Mongols got the horse to give the upward neck nod to those they liked, those they didn't like.
That's right.
That's smart.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So now, with all this silliness aside, I do want to remind everybody while we're all laughing and it's all hilarious, ha ha ha, what you should be doing also is hitting the like button, subscribing to the channel, hitting the notification bell, and that way you get your little email in the morning every day when we go live, which is every day. So today, we want to talk about Salty Jinx. Confirmation bias, it proves my point. Thanks, Salty. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit more about, the social dilemma. So social media being social media, it is both a tool. Well, it is a tool, and it's being used both well and not so well. And Threads just came out. We were chatting a bit about it yesterday with Tanya, and I saw a comment that you had made, Seb, about, we'll see where this goes. It could be good or bad, but I wanted to get your opinion on, the platforms in general, and I think we should really discuss the actual dilemma that is social media. So, what are your thoughts right off the bat? I'm going to put you on the fire.
Yeah, I don't know anything about Thread, right? so it was me more asking the question, and I didn't immediately discount it. What I did do is discount myself from it. And the reason is I'm not questioning whether or not it's a great tool or whether or not it has the potential to do something positive or anything like that, because I think at the end of the day it's all end user induced, right? Like you can take anything and turn it into something positive if you're the driving force behind and you're and a righteous goal of using it. But for me, I have to look internally, and I'm like, how much time do I spend on social media on the various platforms that I'm on? And what is the likelihood of adding another platform leading to me spending more time on social and, between the three? And so in order for me to do that and to decide whether or not the juice is worth the squeeze, so to speak, I have to know exactly what it does different or differently, and what can it bring, and how much time can I, sort of allocate to it if I decide to go down that road. But again, I don't know anything about it, so I was just at the stage of, and I do that quite often. I will let a couple guinea pigs go first. The only time that I change this order is if we do something that's deadly, then I'll always be first. But if we're doing something like this, I don't have a problem with letting a couple of people that have a little bit more time on their hands to go down the rabbit hole of that new social media platform to see if there's value in it for me.
Send some canaries down the mine. I like it. Shaun, you got any thoughts?
I don't mind being a canary.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and I actually don't mind. And to Seb's point, when Meta kicked out Threads, the Threads app is part of the Meta universe to some degree. Not the metaverse, but part of the Meta tool sets. So Threads is a new thing, and we're in day 3 now, day 3-ish. And when I first saw it come on the scene, which was within a matter of a couple of hours of it being launched, I took a look at it and I thought, what the heck is this thing? It wasn't even on my radar. And I thought, oh, I wonder if this is going to be useful. But my cynical mind, my cynically social media mind immediately thought this, here we go again. It's just going to be another dumpster fire. It's going to suck. It's going to blah, blah, blah. All of the negative things that, generally speaking, I'm kind of expecting right from the get-go. I had to shut my grid down. I had to stop my brain from spooling out what I think is going to be the natural outcome of this thing, and that I'm going to have to dump it, and et cetera, et cetera. Kind of like Seb, I just didn't want to put the time into something that I thought wasn't going to be worth my time. However, I had to kick my own arse a little bit and say, all right, let's just treat it like a clean slate, like it is maybe going to be a positive tool that I can either engage with like-minded people or start creating a tribe of like-minded people or connect into a tribe like Mark Ormrod, as I mentioned in my post just recently, who is already starting to build his tribe. And to build a tribe, I think there's a contrived way and there's a cool way. And Mark is doing it in a cool way. So if someone is out there already kind of kicking arse a little bit in Threads and setting up a cool, fun little clubhouse to hang out, I don't want to have to do all the heavy lifting. If Mark is already got a good pace going, I just want to support it to some degree, not quite from the sidelines, but support it in a way that he knows I'm in the game with him, but he's leading the charge to some degree. And so I'm at a point now where I see a pattern potential to be able to use Threads for good, not for evil, to start connecting more veterans, first responders, law enforcement across Canada, across North America, across the intergalactic sphere, as long as we not get really tribal, but as long as we create a cool tribe that understands that we're all not like drone-minded individuals and we're incapable of anything other than a singular focus. I think that Threads is going to allow certainly me to play between Threads and Instagram and create a combined tribe. Now, let me give an example of that. As this morning was the proof is in the pudding, as it were. So I know David through you, Seb, David BJJ. David, and he had seen a post that I put up on my Instagram account that referenced Mark Ormrod and how he was doing good over in Threads. So he saw that, went over to the Threads, saw what Mark is into, and then made a comment in Mark's Threads based on my comment that said, hey, this is, generally speaking, he said, hey, this is awesome. How can I help? And I just sat back and thought, there it is. There's the pattern. Connecting this to that, that to that, and then this connects to that, and now we're all in a big game together. And so I thought that was really cool of David to make that connection, literally. And then we had a little moment where he said, hey, this is starting to happen. And it is starting to happen as long as we make it happen. And so on day 0, I didn't want anything to do with it. Now I'm day 3 and I'm thinking there's potential.
Mm-hmm. But can you explain to me what it is exactly? So it's kind of like a Twitter. It's kind of as I understand it, it's kind of like a Twitter with a limited amount of character.
Yeah. So as I understand it, again, it is early days, and I haven't spent the time that I've spent observing it has been time eyes on the target. I haven't researched the target. I've been observing the target. And so I'm seeing how everyone plays with it or misplays with it. I'm already muting or blocking, or I don't want to know what the weather is in central Utah right now from news station WKRP. But that's what you'll get in your feed if you don't like rapidly sort of shape your we'll call it your homepage on Threads. Of course, much like Instagram, you can have you can shape your social media feed for good or for bad. And so I'm being really intentional in the start here to kind of shape my not my following, but shape my feed. And so one of the really interesting things that I think you'll appreciate, Seb, is Threads removes a lot of the heavy lifting in this respect. So you've already got a large Instagram following. And the moment that you install Threads as an app onto your phone, it is a separate entity from Instagram, but the two are connected. Okay. So you play in Instagram or you play in Threads, or you can play in both, but they're two different things. Now, I want you to think of Threads as sort of a form of Twitter, but I'll refine that in a sec. And what happens is all of your followers on Instagram, the moment that you install Threads and click, and this is what I did, select, import all followers. I just hit do it. And what happened was anyone who follows me on Instagram got an invite from Threads to follow me. And some of those followers were then automatically followed by me on Threads if whatever the algorithm decided they're good friends or close friends or we're tight or whatever. I haven't really looked into the nuances of that, but as it stands right now, I clicked do it, and I've already got, I think, almost 100 followers on Threads, and I'm not trying to create followers. They got imported over from my IG, and they immediately joined, as it were. So I haven't had to do any building or any lifting, and I haven't had to consider who I want to invite into Threads, because the cool people that I like on Instagram are already now on Threads, if that makes sense. So my Threads account has already been built out with people that I already know, and now I can kind of get introduced to more people that I'm not seeing on IG. Does that make sense so far?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, the difference between Threads and Twitter is this. With Twitter, like I had a Twitter account for quite a few years, and I developed a certain vibe over there, and I had to delete it a few years ago because it's just getting crazy. I just didn't appreciate the negativity and all the yelling and etc. It was a bummer to bounce Twitter, but it got bounced. And so now with Threads, it's similar to Twitter, except you can put in keyword filters. So if you don't want to hear about politics, you can select the keyword politics, and that's it. Anyone who's chirping about politics in their text, well, now you don't see it. Now you don't have to be bothered with, if you're offended by pink flamingos, well, type in the word pink flamingos, and from that point on, you don't have to read about pink flamingos. So there's a way to shape the information that is being delivered to your feed, unlike Twitter. Now, they've got some other tools that, are nuanced that you can shape your feed. But I think the real difference between Twitter and Threads at this point is if you jump into the Threads game today, you'll immediately have a base following without doing an ounce of work. And they'll be all people that you're cool with. And so then you can play with Threads and see if it is or isn't for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
I just started playing with it as well. I got the collective on it. I got myself on it, and posted about today to join us live with the links and stuff on it. One thing I've noticed with it is actually it's much more user friendly than Twitter is.
It is.
Oh yeah.
That's just my personal take on it. Doxy says, I would love for it to keep out politics and news organizations. Leave it to the people, not these divisive groups, in my opinion.
And he says I feel the same way.
He says they actually hired Twitter employees to help design it, hence the Elon Musk lawsuit because of that. So also interesting.
Fired Twitter employees, that is.
Yeah, that's right. Fired for no good reason other than a mismanaged platform.
Yeah. And then Salty says, I agree with Doc C, but wonder if it will simply become an echo chamber for the individual. And that's a real concern. If you can really if you can really fine tune what it is you're actually going to be seeing on threads, it can turn into an echo chamber very quickly. In which case you will just if you have negative inclinations, then you'll see negative stuff, which is, I think, the issue with social media in general, but also in society in general. I mean, if we really wanted, I used to think about this when I was a kid. How do you become a thug? Right? Like in movies, you always have like the main villain, and then they always have thugs. And it's like, do you go for a job interview? Is there like a process in which you got to become a thug, or there's like stepping stones? I don't know. I used to think about that as a kid. And I was realizing that in society, that's that echo chamber, right? You start to hang out with certain people, and then you start hanging out with more select certain people and more select certain people. And if that goes down the realm of, criminality, you can become a thug pretty quickly. But if you also hang around with cool people, then you can become a cool person pretty quickly. And it can happen with social media, I think, maybe faster than it can happen in society itself. But
connections so much faster.
Yeah, so much faster.
So how do we, I guess, manage that, especially as a new realm? You're talking about developing your culture or developing your feed, which is really what you're doing, is trying to develop the culture of the platform, is it not?
I think so. And I think how do you do that? Well, I set a really hard stance a long time ago. My simple rule, I've got a few simple rules, but this is one of the simple rules: never cross over to the dark side. I set that rule when I was leaving JTF2, because I knew that I had potential to do literally anything in the world. Like, name a bank that you need robbed, I'll go rob it. Yeah, and I'm only kidding, internet. I'm only kidding. But I knew that if when I bounced, I could literally do anything that I wanted. And my rule to myself was never cross over to the dark side, and I never have. And but it's appealing from time to time. There's the dark side has a certain appeal to it because it's a shortcut. You want to be rich at the end of the day, go rob a bank. But that is obviously crazy. But there is a certain, maybe appeal isn't the right word, but there's a certain thing in humans that sometimes we look for the shortcut.
Yeah,
and I try to keep that in check within myself. I do not like shortcutting. And so I recognize that it's a human thing. And so I really drew a mega hard line in the sand for myself. And I made it simple. Just make it all Star Wars-ish. Never cross over to the dark side. And that's what I've tried to live my life by.
Yeah, I've fought that for decades. I mean, it's always been a thing, to the point where eventually it became normal ideation for me, in the sense that I always felt, you're this close from being on the other side, but I wasn't. It was the duality of my personality and the things I was able to do that I needed to be able to do in order to do what I was tasked with doing. And you eventually reconcile the two, and you're like, no, this is just a normal course of action. If you're in this field, you're going to have some draws to certain things that are necessarily not in line with what you're doing. So the first time I had a conversation, this is long after Mom became a therapist, and I had a long conversation with her about that one time, and I said, I'm totally not liking or against violence. Like I dislike violence, all this good stuff. And she's like, well, why aren't you a monk? Right? Like, if you dislike violence as much as you say you do, why aren't you a monk? Why did you choose that? And so now you get into the whole, oh yeah, okay, if I really, really disliked violence to that extent, I would have chosen something else where I never needed to use it. And so, it's not that I liked when I had to, but I was capable of doing it. And somebody that's completely incapable of doing it is going to be doing something else, not that, so it's kind of a really interesting, anyways, I digress, but
no, I don't think you digress, because I feel the same way, whether I'm comfortable with these kind of things or confident with these kind of things, or whether that is me. I don't know, but I do know this, that I've had to draw a very hard line with myself to never, ever freaking cross over to the dark side, Shaun. And I don't know, Seb. It's a curious notion. I've never really considered it before, because I've never really spoken to anyone about it before, publicly anyway. Where I've said, maybe I have a little bit of darkness in me. I don't know.
You have
I have
to.
a little. Sometimes I have a little bit of a mean streak in me, to some degree, that I have to control my dark force within me, even if it's only a 0.3% of me. I don't know what it is. It's probably bigger, but I have to keep it in check, and I have to keep it in check with simple rules for myself, like never cross over to the dark side.
Yeah.
This is a great point. And actually, Doxy brings up a point that I said it again. I'm going to stop using that word, actually. Doxy says, hey, what about Shaolin monks? And I was just thinking about this, is that you are a monk. You are a warrior monk, right? That is the thing. You can train for violence. You can utilize violence. You can be ready for it and aware of it. But you're not outwardly violent.
Yep.
You
have it under voluntary control.
Exactly. And I think that it goes to, you were saying that, why aren't you a monk? I think you are. I think you both are. And you, because of those rules that you set, and Shaun, you say it all the time, the standard is the standard, right? There is a line that you will not cross, period. And that keeps you on the light side versus the dark side. That way there's no gray. It is, you are either this side or you're not.
Yeah. It's not just something that I use for myself as a rule of thumb. I use it for my own boys from very early age. Of course, they like Star Wars. They like the Force. They like Obi-Wan Kenobi. They like the whole thing, and that universe, or that story, is a great story to be able to raise boys with, and that's how I raise my boys. I explained to them that you have to be Obi-Wan Kenobi, not Darth Vader. You have to understand that there's this thing called the Force, and that you can use it in a way that creates good, not evil. That's how I've raised my boys. I'm not going to say that they're hardcore believers in the Force. Maybe they're low-grade believers in the Force, but I believe in it, and I believe there's a way to shape our universe all around us, for sure. And if you make the wrong choices, the universe that is in front of all of us right now is a result of those wrong choices. The moment that we all disappear from this podcast and go on with our own separate lives that aren't visually connected, we're still connected. If Chance or Seb did something evil, in a sense, I'm still connected to them. Like, I'm going to feel that action. I'm going to feel that disappointment, that remorse, that blah, blah, blah. And so I feel that even if Seb and Chance aren't visual to me, the things that I say, my actions are impacting them. The things that they say and their actions impact me. We are interconnected across the Force, and it's our responsibility to choose which side we want to be on, who we want to hang with, how we want to represent ourselves, how we want to shape our world to be better.
100%. So you got?
Get out of here.
Yeah. So I agree 100%, and I really like that. And you know what's it brings the other piece to this, which is, we always say surround yourself with savages and do all those things. Also surround yourself with people that are unshakable in their beliefs in respect to what it is that they represent. Because if they're flippy floppy, and you catch them in a good spot, and now they become a part of who you are, and you're interwoven all your things and your social media persona and your collaborations and everything with them, and things go majorly pear-shaped on account of they decided to go on another trip now that's completely opposite to what they portrayed for the last little while. Now you find yourself dragged into that mess, and there are people out there that I generally will or would associate with, but I am almost 100% guaranteed they are going to blow something up at some point. There is too many indication that something is going to go majorly wrong in their decision making, and they were going to make a big mess, and you don't want to be associated with that. So yes, I want to help them avoid that mess that I perceive they're going to, eventually find themselves into. But I, more importantly, want to avoid me and anybody else being dragged into it. And so that's why surrounding yourself with savages is good, but pick those savages wisely. And I'm not talking about like regular mistakes that humans are making or whatever. I mean, I'm not talking about any of that. I'm talking about willful, things that would send major disrepute in your group, right?
Yeah. And that's a good clarifying point, Seb, because like I can look back on my social media and I have so much regret on how poor I did social media. And I also have some regret on, I've tried to be helpful and I've just done it wrong. And, or I've been on, Seb, you would understand this. Before I did a podcast with James Gearing, I was talking with James and I didn't have my act together, man, to have a proper positive conversation that would be good for others. And so it has taken me so long to figure this stuff out. It feels like it's been 4 lifetimes worth of work to get to this point. And I'm still uncomfortable with it, but at least now I understand how to shape the force a little bit better over here on the social media side of things. And to that point, I had a friend DM me this morning, and she said, hey, and I'm going to paraphrase here. You keep saying you're really bad at social media, but you're not, and you got to stop saying it. But that's how I feel, man. That's how I feel. I just feel that I'm not good at it. And by thinking that, it drives me to get better.
Sure.
And so when I say to myself, I've got to do better, it's not just for me. It's because I don't want to drag my friends down. And so in order to do social media better to some degree, to the social dilemma, I feel that you've got to have your sense of why you're doing it, how you're going to do it, and the velocity that you're going to do it at. Just like we've talked about before. If you don't know why you're on this planet, grab a piece of paper and a pen, write down why, and then write down how, and then write down velocity. 1 out of 10, 10 out of 10, figure it out. Well, that's the case for social dilemma or social media, as it were. Why am I doing it? How am I doing it? And what velocity am I going to apply? Now, if it was just me out in the nowheresville of social media and I wasn't doing it for a team, forget about it. But because I'm doing it for a team, I've got to represent that team in a way that I don't embarrass the team, or I don't drag the team down, or I don't disrespect the team, or the people who are joining the team are good people, and I want them to understand that I'm not a goof. And so there is a certain element of responsibility to social media that is way beyond just our stupid little solo journeys. And so I am trying to, the dilemma of social media for me is I don't want to do it, but I have to do it because I know it's the right thing to do. And therefore I am going to own it. I'm going to crush it. I'm going to smash it. I'm going to give it my all. The dilemma is, are you all in or are you a dabbler? That's my dilemma, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get what she was saying to you in the sense that, have you ever been in a group where there's either a super attractive woman or man that makes a comment about being fat, and then there's an actual fat person next to them, and you just feel all awkward because why
fair enough.
And I think for most people, like the level at which you're operating, just having a regular conversation is out of reach, right? And if that's already out of reach, then what are you complaining about? So I see what her point is, but you also have to understand what the person is all about, right? When Tiger Woods broke a club after he was done missing, a perfect shot, everybody in their dog was like ragging on him for letting his temper get the best of him and everything. And I'm like, how do you think he got there? How do you think he got there? And I'm not suggesting he shouldn't be controlling his emotions, like everybody should, obviously, but there is a certain, it will be disturbing to most people that are struggling with a basic skill set in golf to watch one of the best golfer on the planet react when he does a shot that for them would be the shot of a lifetime. but it doesn't change the fact that his standard and his threshold is over here, and that's why he's upset right now. It has nothing to do with you. It shines a light on your insecurities, but that doesn't make him responsible for it. Anyways,
that's right. No, you're 100%. And I've got no issue with anyone snapping their putter in half if they're a driven individual. Like if you're driven and you're disappointed with your performance, freaking snap all the putters in the world. It'll be expensive, but snap them all. And so that's right. The metaphorical representation of a putter being snapped in half is kind of how I run my life. When I am focused and driven and I want to do the best for everyone around me, I get frustrated with myself when I don't deliver, because I'm not a freaking robot. I am still a human, and I have a fairly decent grip on my emotional state, but man, I make mistakes and I'm disappointed with Shaun. So, how to let that out? Well, again, I'm not a robot, so I can't bury it all down to level 27 and ignore it. I've got to sometimes, deal with it in real time. And sometimes I might even swear if there's no one around me. So, I think we've all got to figure out our own little moments when it's really frustrating or disappointing, when we're letting ourselves down to some degree. It's tricky.
Absolutely. Sure it is. And what adds to the complexity around the social media piece is seemingly constantly shifting. Right. So there's the trends are shifting, certain things are shifting, and you find yourself wanting to do something that you're actually quite qualified and good at, and eventually everybody's doing it. So now you're like, okay, now I have to kind of reinvent and separate myself from the pack, so to speak, in pursuing X, Y, and Z. And now I have to recraft a path that becomes, the new path. And then in 6 months from now, everybody's on the bandwagon. And now you're like, okay, because everything gets droned out and everything gets just watered down, right? Like it's really, really interesting dichotomy to have to negotiate the ebbs and flows of that and remain steadfast with your mission statement. So it's kind of like having the being adaptable, essentially, is what I'm getting at, right? You have to be super adaptable.
Yeah. And man, oh man, I don't have the time or the desire to start managing another platform. I don't want any platforms, but I do know this. I have a certain responsibility to start doing recon on it. Call it a Pathfinder mindset or whatever. I need to get in there and figure it out so that I can set a bridgehead of positivity, and then, drop zone control a bunch of awesome people into then start assaulting the objective. And so I got to get in there. I got to get my hands dirty and probably screw a few things up. But as I'm rapidly evolving or absorbing that new platform, I'm just going to try to shape it as a positive bridgehead.
I think that's kind of hilarious. I had this mental image said when you were talking a second ago of, when you start something new and then it starts to drone, everyone starts to kind of clamber on in it. Have you ever seen a child make you laugh? Like just doing something silly and then make you laugh. And then guess what happens? They're going to do that silly thing 7 million times. And it's not going to be funny after like 4 or 5. And it's going to drive you absolutely insane. And I was just getting this little mental image of my boys doing something. And I'm like, yeah, that's social media in and of itself. Just that little microcosm. Got a couple comments here that are just really poignant. I wanted to hit out. First off, Darshan Chaudhry, hi bro, love from India.
Hey,
love right back from Canada.
Awesome.
Yeah, nice.
And then we got Terminal City. Chance that bear chin looks good.
I know, man. Yeah, actually, okay, I think we have to have that conversation for a second.
Yeah, for reals.
Hey, Chance, I don't think you should grow that thing back.
Do not grow that thing back.
I agree. I think you looked a lot better without it. It's 100%. Weird.
Yeah.
I was thinking about it today and yesterday with the fact that
you were actually what?
I actually was 100%. I was actually thinking about it. Actually,
you actually did.
Not figuratively, not literally.
It's not that you didn't do it. It's that you did do it. Actually
happened. Thank you for
that. I'm out there with you. I have to curb that word also.
So I was thinking about it this morning and yesterday actually while we were at jiu-jitsu, and I find myself grabbing for it or going to touch it or whatever, but I don't really miss it that much. And a lot of times, like having it brush on my clothing or getting food in it or all the negative sides of it. And it's been a decade, so I'm liking this. And then Doc C said I looked like I was 30 yesterday, and I was like, I will take that as a win across the board.
We're all winning, buddy.
Yeah, everybody's winning on top.
How old are you, anyways?
I'm 40, just 40.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so
you're still a young
4-0. Yep. Chris K says all Jedi, which is kind of where we are. Doc C says you're in my area, the dark side. It's interesting how many special forces guys want to discuss about the dark side and psychopathy.
For a friend.
Yeah, for a friend.
I've got a buddy.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think it's just special forces guys. I know a lot of just regular vets, all action people. That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, action men for sure.
Who just want to understand it a little bit better. Salty says it's okay to be comfortable with violence as long as you have the ethos and morals and values to establish when it's acceptable and not, and realize the consequences.
Absolutely. The difference is self-discipline, right?
Exactly.
Right.
It brings up an interesting point in the fact that in any culture that has a warrior class, there becomes a warrior culture in and amongst itself, because if it's just all out violence all the time, then you don't really have a class. So you just have a bunch of people fighting. I think that's interesting. He also says, but violence comes in degrees as well. You can verbally set a boundary instead of going right to a throat punch, and it helps to be in a good in a good group to set your values. I think that's really accurate. You got any thoughts on any of that?
Yeah, well, it does. Violence. I would say holding someone accountable is a reference to violence in a sense. So I don't even have to take my hands out of my pockets. If someone is just being a goof, I'll use word violence on them if I have to.
Yeah, it's a use of force.
Yeah, it's a use of force for sure. And it's not that I want to make them cry or whatever. I'm not looking for a mean outcome. I'm just looking for, you're going to be accountable in this conversation. And maybe there's maybe a little bit of darkness comes out of me when I'm holding someone mega accountable if they're a mega goof. I'm not talking about a standard issue person who's made a mistake and you just want to let them know, hey, before you cross the street, look left and right. That's an entirely different conversation than someone who's Darth Vadering it, and I need to let them know that you just can't do that, bro. So I think there is violence with words if you want to use it as such.
I like that. So have you got anything?
No, directed violence, man. It is. That's why when you're showing up on a call as a law enforcement officer, for example, the first level of force is presence. Like just your mere presence in uniform and everything, and then you start talking. Then it's you got that verbalization use of force. It makes total sense.
Something that I'd never thought of until just now, and Seb, you would know. Maybe it's different terminology now, but when I was teaching at the use of force instructor at the Ontario Police College, that's quite a long time ago. It was officer presence, and then I believe the next one was verbal de-escalation. But it was never called anything other than verbal de-escalation. Whereas as I think about it now, it could just be called verbal presence, because you might be de-escalating or you might be escalating in a way that leads to a blah 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 whatever, etc. So I'd always in my head framed it as such, verbal de-escalation, but maybe that's a misnomer.
Yeah, we call it verbalization, basically, because it can go up and down, right? And sometimes you are absolutely correct. Sometimes you may have to escalate in tactics to de-escalate a situation. So you're theoretically escalating, but you're in mind de-escalation, right?
Yeah,
which seems counterintuitive, but it is real. Yeah.
Well, only by it might. On paper, it's counterintuitive, of course, but wielded in the hands of the right person, it's perfect. Sure.
Yeah. So in line with the social dilemma, one of the problems that we see constantly on the policing side, and I know it's been quite the same on the military side, but the policing side is quite serious, is the inability to connect with other human beings in person. And that is a big problem. And you see these kids, they're going out on their social media, they have a character, and they have sort of a personality, and they're able to communicate in an effective way or whatever. And then you see them on the street dealing with people, and they cannot for the life of them have a regular conversation. And if there's any pushback from the person that they're addressing, now it's like a full out conflict somehow, because there's no ability. So I think it's really important, especially for the youngins that are watching perhaps the collective, or eventually this gets to them, to understand that having face-to-face conversations is critical, just as reading an actual book is very important. It's going to help with your writing. It's going to have all those things that you cannot get from an audiobook, all those things that you can't get from a podcast, that your benefits that you're going to get from reading an actual paper book. Anyways, but the same is to be said about social interactions. Like, you need to have them in person. You need to have conversations in person. You need to have some pushback and some constructive discourse in person, and you need to have the ability to manage these types of conversation, because otherwise you're showing up. You're not armed to face life. It's that simple.
That's right. And as part of that process, I think that in order to understand how to do it better, which we all need beacons of how to do it better. That's what I need most in my life, is something in front of me that I'm pursuing, something that is done way better than I can, so that I know it can be done better, so that I can pursue that betterment. And that's one of my minor hopes over here with the collective, as we get better at it. I think we're kind of there now, where we're sort of illustrating or setting an example of how to communicate better with others in a live conversation. And I don't think it's that common that people do this kind of thing. And if you're in a remote part of Canada or a remote part of the world, or if you just don't have these kind of conversations with friends or acquaintances or random people for that matter, if you don't know how to do it, just watch what we're doing. This is how we're all supposed to communicate. And it's like a free class of communication to some degree.
Sure is.
Yeah. When I was in school, just a little few years back at NAIT, I had to take a like a basic communications course, and it was quite surprising how difficult it was for a lot of people to have just basic conversations, or give like a 1-minute speech in front of 12 people. Right? It was it was pretty surprising. And again, it more so just from the fact that I was used to the military aspect of anybody. You walk up to the thing, you say what you're gonna say, you walk down. It's pretty simple. But it goes to what your point is there, Seb, is the fact that if you don't have the experience, if you don't actually put in the time of doing it, it's not just gonna appear out of thin air and be like, poof, oh, I can communicate with people excellent at a very high level. Excellent. And it reminded me of when I was a kid. I don't recall ever being like baby talked to. I remember being introduced to adults at a very young age and spoken to in the same manner that the adults were speaking to each other in, right? And so my level of communication increased quite a bit as that was happening, and I was able to speak, I guess, at a higher level than some of my peers when I was in school. But not only that, but read and develop ideas and write and do all these other things. But I think a lot of it's just the experience. And if you're not getting the experience online, especially in these types of conversations, you got to go outside and talk. I mean, Shaun, you put out a challenge the other day. I guess this would have been a few weeks ago to, I can't remember who it was, but like sit in a coffee shop, talk to somebody, engage in a conversation, just a general conversation about whatever, as a challenge. Yeah. And that kind of blows me away, but
just pick an attractive person.
There you go. Because that's not going to make it harder.
Well, that'll make at least one.
Yeah, there you go.
At least one in the conversation.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, 50% of us are involved in this.
I think that there's I think that's something that we should actually encourage. Now that I'm thinking about it, we'll make this
actually what
challenge. Yeah,
actually. How actually should we actually?
I mean,
all right,
actually it in the Thank you very much. I think it's a challenge that we should put out there. So I'm going to do that right now. So followers of the collective people, go start a conversation. Sit down at a coffee shop, sit down in a bookstore or whatever. Engage in a conversation directly. and then post about it. Talk about it afterwards. How did it feel? How did it make you feel? All that good
All right,
stuff.
you've thrown a challenge out there, not very well thought out. So
No.
what would that look like if you were just wandering into a coffee shop? How would that play out?
Well, for instance,
throw a creamer at the back of someone's head and say, "Let's sit down and let's talk." No, lay it out, Chance Burrows.
Point at them like that. Here we go. Clean it up. Okay, so as an example, I would say go into a coffee shop, perhaps buy yourself a coffee or a tea or something that you would like. Sit down at a table, scan the room, see if there's anybody else that looks like they would be open to a conversation, and then engage in one.
That'd be creepy.
You think so?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
You sit down, you're scanning the room, and then you stand up, walk over to them and say, "Hey, man, I've been staring at you for 5 minutes. Would you like to talk? Let's go a little bit more organic." So you walk into a coffee shop and you got someone in front of you, someone behind you, and then you just look at one of them and say, "Hey, how you doing?" See where it goes. Now, no one has to crack the DNA of whatever. No one has to solve ... All you got to do is make a tiny effort today. "Hey, man, how you doing?" "Oh, cool hat. Where are you from?" Whatever. Try to create an organic opportunity that then unfolds into a natural conversation rather than a creamer in the back of the head and say, "Talk now." I mean, you gotta allow these things to happen. But I'm using intentional words here. Allow it to happen. You're allowing it to happen by setting it up for the allowing it to happen. You have to be a active participant in it, but you also have to be open to the other person's organic interplay in the moment. And it's not you don't saunter in there, sit down and recon the place and start identifying your targets. What you do is
lock on people
in life. If you can walk through life on a constant basis and be open to interaction with anyone. I do it all the time, walking down the sidewalk. I talk to people that I'll never see again. And if they're interesting to me, I'll find a way to strike up a conversation so that it's either amusing me or entertaining me, or I'm learning something, or they're learning something, or we could talk about the weather for 5 minutes. And in that 5 minutes, I'll learn something from them and they'll learn something from me. But it's not a contrived or a forced effort. You can't leave your house this morning and think, "I'm going to force someone into a conversation as a challenge." Chance Burrows threw out a loosely framed challenge.
Yes.
I'm going to end my conversation in front of an interrogation board.
Yes, thank you for the clarification. That is a much better setup for sure. Matt jumps in with, there was a challenge called the 10% discount, where you buy something and you ask for a discount. The goal is not really the discount, but to start the dialogue. I like that.
Yeah.
Like that. That's another great way to do it.
You know what I do with the girls, and this is good for parents. Obviously, our kids are living with the social media piece for a lot longer than we have even, and that's their only reality. So one of the things I used to do with the girls is we'd be driving around and I'd say, "Okay, next street sign, I want you to tell me all about why this would be a good place to live." So then they'd look at a street sign and they'd say, "Okay, there's a Starbucks nearby, and that would make go get your coffee easy," or whatever. So then I would get them to build this little dialogue where for, say, 2.5 minutes, they would have to sell to me why I should purchase a house on that street. And then what I would do as another exercise with them would be, "Okay, I need you to identify what it is that you prefer, X, Y, and Z." And so my first daughter would say X, my other daughter would say Z. I'd say, "Okay, you are now going to explain to each other why the other person's preference is better." And so I had them, instead of having them sell their own argument to their sisters with respect to what they wanted, I wanted them to sell to the other one's argument. So now it would force them into a place where they have to look at the other side of and find common ground on the other side. So they would eventually, what would happen often is that they would say, "You know what, I kind of like this too," or maybe it changes things a little bit. And then they, critical analysis teaching to kids, really.
I like that. I like that a lot. There's a couple other. Salty Jinx says all skills need reps to get better. from writing to fighting to thinking, but we need to build experience and to seek challenges for improvement in our development. We spend time at a gym, so why don't we spend our own time on other skills?
Yeah.
18 minutes a day is all it takes, which I think is reference to 100 hours by the end of a year on any one task. Terminal City says, little entry points. Hey, nice Malinois. You do any dog sports with her? Or Cormac McCarthy, his books are great. That is a great thing. Starting conversation with a compliment is always really good. Nice shoes. Cool hat. I like your shirt. That kind of
nice
stuff.
Bum.
That goes a little, depends on your...
You must be squatting.
Sure. You got any more? let's get it up. No. Yeah. It's an interesting thing, actually, now that I'm really developing the thoughts in my mind of trying to create a conversation authentically without being overt that you're trying to start a conversation. And that is a skill set in and of itself that I'm going to work on as well.
Oh, I don't think there's a need for that wanting to start a conversation piece to be a national secret. Like, anybody who addresses somebody else in a lineup obviously wants to speak, and I'm not talking about having necessarily an in-depth conversation, but I don't think that I'd be focusing. I'm not focusing there. It's not a thing. And perhaps the person you speak to isn't open to it, and you'll find out really quickly and you just move on. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily about that, but can we establish a connection? And I think we as humans, we've disconnected from each other critically to a point where we're so divided. And having, we can always wait for everybody or for somebody to come in and unify us, or we can do it internally. And it's whether we win that war or not is irrelevant. We'll be fighting the battle.
Yeah, 100%.
I would say that Seb raises a good point. I should have been very clear about this. When I say, "Hey, nice hat," I don't want to know your bank account number. I just want to get a read. Mm-hmm. I want to get a read on the person. I want to check out their vibe before I say, "Hey, nice hat." I've already got my vibe, but I'm quantifying or qualifying my vibe that I'm picking up from the nonverbal cues. And generally speaking, their verbal response synchronizes with my nonverbal cue recognition. And I think it is important to try to establish communication with someone. And if you're new at it, I mean, it is a skill, and you're going to screw it up. You're going to say, "Hey, nice hat." Maybe, I'm going to turn around and say, "You said what?" Or whatever. Whatever response you get is immaterial. What you're going to figure out is responses. You're going to start understanding a continuum of responses, and then you're going to start forming a pattern. And then in a year or 2 or 10 or whatever, however long it takes, you can look at a person and think, I know where I'm going to take that conversation, generally speaking. Before I say a word, I know how this is going to unfold, and then start unfolding it and see where it goes. And that takes a long time to make those kind of connection reads. It takes a lot of mistakes. It takes a lot of people looking over their shoulder, sometimes saying, "You got a problem?" I mean, you just got to figure these things out. You've got to make mistakes in trying to connect with other humans so you can understand your bandwidth of how it works and how it doesn't. And once you start figuring out it a little bit better, it'll feel a lot more authentic. It'll feel a lot more organic, and it'll feel a lot more natural. And then you can just connect with anyone throughout the world on a bus, in a train. It doesn't matter where it is or who it is. It could be the highest of the highs, the lowest of lows. It doesn't matter. Whatever that means to anyone, you can connect with anyone.
That is a great point. Some of the viewers are putting down a whole bunch of other suggestions on ways to get into a conversation, but
we don't need to hear.
We don't need to go into them yet. They're kind of hilarious. But anyway, we're almost at time here, so let's get a couple final thoughts on the social dilemma, on conversing with others, on anything that we've gone over. Seb?
Yeah, I mean, it's just having the ability to recognize our own limitations. If something is a rabbit hole for us and it sucks into a world that makes everything we do more difficult or impedes what the ultimate goal is, but if there is just natural resistance, I think it's important to look into what causes that resistance. And is there, because we know that anything that's uncomfortable causes resistance. So, and we also know that doing things that are uncomfortable is a good way to promote growth. And so I'm striking that balance when I see certain things. And so that's why I didn't shut down the prospect of getting that thread thingamajiggy, but I certainly wanted a couple days just to see how it unfolds, to make sure that I'm not creating the rabbit hole that I will be spending my time in on account of the other things that I need to do so that I can get where I want to go. So it's a balancing act, just like anything else. And as soon as we go black or white, you're probably wrong. Like something in the middle.
Absolutely. Shaun, final thoughts?
Yeah. My first thing I'd like to say is, dude, pick up the pace, start scrabbling down that rabbit hole with me. Come on.
Do you even have it? Oh, you do. Yeah.
Oh, I'm crushing it over there, buddy. Crushing it. Are you even going to be able to catch up? I mean, what the heck? My closing point would be this. Just try to figure out what side you're on. And I say over here all the time, we're not trying to create division, but we are trying to create clarity. And in this moment, you just think about, are you on the light side or the dark side? Are you in the good game or the bad game? Do you want to be Obi-Wan Kenobi or do you want to be Darth Vader? You can't be both. You can't be two characters in one. And if you are, you've got to figure out which one is the dominant one and which one needs to get smashed into almost oblivion, which is Darth Vader, and figure out how to get your balance so that you are putting goodness out into the world.
Yeah, 100%. Was General Gronsky said this: do the right things for the right reasons, and they'll be returned to you in time. And I think that's a really a key thing. Just do the right thing. What if you think it's the right thing to do? Do that thing.
Didn't he call it karma?
I think it was something like karma. Yeah,
I mean, retired Major General John Gronsky throwing out a word like karma. Who knew? Who knew?
I imagine there are some people who knew, as there have been many books and things written about it, but I didn't know, that's for sure. The benefit, I think, really is in this. If we can just get along, everything will be better from that point on. And I think that starts with new platforms. It starts with all kinds of things. It lets us learn who we are. It lets us build our communities, and it lets us grow into the larger society that we want. And you can do that with us every day here on The Collective. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Chimo.